Return from the Abyss, Book 1.
Chapter 3. A Strange Awakening. Green, the color registered in Kayden's mind before anything else. A hue so alien, so impossible, that his brain struggled to process it. Not red, not black, not the blood-crimson twilight that had defined his entire existence for a decade. Green. His eyes snapped fully open. Above him, impossibly, stretched a canopy of leaves. Real leaves, attached to real branches, swaying gently in a breeze that carried scents his nose had forgotten existed. Earth, vegetation, moisture, life. Beyond the canopy, glimpsed through gaps in the foliage, was sky. Blue sky. The color hurt to look at. Beneath him, grass. Actual grass. Soft, yielding, slightly damp. Each blade pressed against his scarred skin with a sensation so foreign it might as well have been fire. Hallucination. The thought formed with crystal clarity. Whisper's mental attack, still happening? Or poison from its bite? Had those needle teeth broken skin? His mind raced through possibilities with the clinical detachment that had kept him alive. The shard. That had to be it. The crystal had done something to his brain, was feeding him false sensory input while his real body lay dying on cold stone. Kayden exploded into motion. He rolled left, came up in a crouch, bone sword somehow already in his hand. Muscle memory so deeply ingrained that his fingers had found the grip before conscious thought engaged. His eyes swept the area in the systematic pattern burned into his reflexes. Close threats first, then middle distance, then far. Ground level, then elevated positions. Cover, concealment, escape routes. All of it processed in the span of 2 heartbeats. Trees. Dozens of them. Tall conifers with bark that looked almost black in the dappled sunlight. Between them, underbrush, ferns, shrubs, plants he couldn't name but recognized as vegetation. Real, physical, 3-dimensional. The forest floor was uneven, covered in fallen needles and decomposing organic matter. No monsters, no twisted flesh ground, no bone structures jutting from impossible earth. This was wrong. Everything was wrong. Kayden's breathing accelerated slightly, still controlled, but faster. His grip on the sword tightened until his knuckles went white. Every sense extended to its maximum, searching for the flaw, the tell, the moment when the illusion would shatter and reveal the true threat. Birds sang. Actual birds, their calls echoing through the forest canopy. In the abyss, the only sounds were screams and death rattles. Here, the soundscape was almost painful in its normalcy. A minute passed, then 2. Nothing attacked. The forest remained exactly as it appeared, peaceful, ordinary, completely at odds with every environment he'd known for the past decade. Gradually, terribly, understanding began to dawn. This wasn't a hallucination. Kayden looked down at himself, cataloging details, with the ruthless efficiency of someone who'd spent 10 years where missing a single piece of information meant death. His body was present, same scars mapping his torso, same white hair falling into his vision, same calloused feet that hadn't felt shoes in a decade. The bone sword in his hand had weight, heft, the familiar balance of a weapon he'd killed with hundreds of times. He was real. The forest was real. But how? His left hand came up almost of its own accord, turning palm upward. Where the shard had entered his flesh, there was now a mark. Not a wound, a scar, but unlike any of the others covering his body. This one glowed faintly, a scarlet luminescence just visible in the forest's shadows. The pattern was intricate, geometric, a star shape maybe 4 centimeters across, but the lines were fragmented, cracked, as if something had shattered and been imperfectly reassembled. Runic, though he couldn't read the meaning. The mark pulsed, once, twice, in rhythm with his heartbeat. What did that thing do to me? A sound cut through his thoughts, distant but unmistakable. Voices. Human voices, speaking words he could almost understand if he focused. Kayden's head snapped toward the source, body automatically shifting into a lower profile. He hadn't heard human speech in 10 years, hadn't heard anything speak except Whisper's musical tones before it tried to kill him. The sound triggered memories he'd thought safely buried. The village, neighbors talking, his mother's voice. He crushed the emotions before they could form fully. Later, survival first. Moving through the forest felt surreal. The ground was soft, yielding, completely unlike the stone and flesh surfaces of the abyss. Gravity was constant, no sudden shifts, no crushing weight or weightlessness. The air temperature was warm, maybe 20 degrees, almost uncomfortable after a decade of constant cold. But his body adapted, as it always had, as it had been forced to do every day for the past 10 years. He flowed between trees with the same silence he'd used to stalk abyss predators. Bare feet finding purchase without sound, body low, never silhouetted against open space. The voices grew louder, more distinct, until he could make out actual words. Third time this month the damn thing has killed livestock. Merchant's contract posted for 5 gold, but the locals are offering another 3 if we bring back proof of the kill. Male voice, younger, eager. Shadow wolf. Different voice, female, calm and authoritative. Class D, which means it's faster and smarter than you think it is, Corin. We go in coordinated, we use the ward stones to limit its shadow phase, and nobody tries to be a hero. Clear? Clear, Myra. Corin again, sounding chastened. Kayden edged closer, using a massive pine's trunk as cover. Through the gaps in the underbrush, he could finally see them. 5 figures stood in a small clearing maybe 30 meters ahead. 4 men, 1 woman. All wore practical traveling clothes, leather armor, sturdy boots, weapons visible on belts and backs. They had the bearing of people comfortable with violence but not currently expecting it. Relaxed but not careless. The woman who had spoken, Myra, was clearly the leader. Mid-20s, athletic build, red hair cropped short, except for a longer section that fell across her left eye. A scar bisected her left eyebrow, pale against tan skin. Green eyes that moved constantly, assessing. A long sword hung at her hip, and the way her hand rested near it suggested she knew how to use it. She radiated confidence and competence in equal measure. Hunters. The word surfaced from Kayden's distant memories. The village had occasionally hired them when monster problems grew too severe for local militia. Professional killers, but the legal kind. The tracks lead deeper into Shadow Needle, one of the men was saying, pointing northeast. Older, scarred, gray in his beard. Wolf's Lair is probably another hour's hike, maybe. He stopped mid-sentence. His eyes, sweeping the tree line out of habit, locked onto the shadows where Kayden stood hidden. Damn. The moment stretched. The old hunter's hand moved to his sword hilt. Myra, he said quietly, we're not alone. All 5 hunters spun toward Kayden's position, weapons coming out with the fluid speed of trained fighters. The woman, Myra, raised one hand, and Kayden saw blue light beginning to gather around her fingers. A mage. His mind cataloged the threat automatically. He could run, should run, disappear into the forest, avoid human contact, figure out where the hell he was and what was happening before engaging with. The scarlet mark on his palm pulsed once, sharp and insistent, and something inside him rebelled against the idea of running. He'd spent 10 years running, hiding, fighting alone in the dark. Whatever this was, wherever he'd ended up, he needed information. And these people might have it. Decision made. Kayden stepped out from behind the tree. The reaction was instantaneous. 5 sets of eyes locked onto him, widening in shock at what they saw. To them, he must have looked like something from a nightmare. A scarecrow figure in tattered rags that had once been clothes. Body covered in scar tissue, like a roadmap of violence. Bone-white hair wild and matted. eyes that didn't reflect light properly, carrying a sword made from actual bone. The youngest hunter, Corin, reacted on pure instinct. "Get back!" he shouted, and fire exploded from his outstretched hand. The fireball streaked toward Kayden, a sphere of orange-red flame maybe the size of his head. In the abyss, he'd fought things that breathed acid, that teleported, that could crush stone with their bare hands. A visible projectile with a clear trajectory was almost insultingly easy to read. His body moved 3 meters to the left in a fraction of a second, speed honed by fighting things faster than any human had a right to be. The fireball passed through empty space, impacting a tree behind him with a concussive whump and a shower of sparks. Kayden came to a stop in a combat stance, sword raised but not threatening, body angled to present minimal target. He hadn't even had to think about the dodge, pure reflex. Silence fell over the clearing. All 5 hunters stared at him. The old one's mouth hung slightly open. Corin looked pale. Myra's eyes had gone very, very sharp, her hand frozen mid-gesture, the blue light around her fingers fading. "What the hell?" someone whispered. "Nobody move." Myra's voice cut through the shock like a blade. Her eyes never left Kayden, assessing him with the focus of a professional trying to determine if she was looking at a threat or just something very, very strange. "You, state your name and business, now." Kayden opened his mouth, tried to speak. No sound came out. His throat remembered how to swallow, how to breathe, how to scream. But words? Actual speech? It had been 10 years. 10 years since he'd needed to form sentences, to communicate anything more complex than a grunt of pain or a roar of fury. His vocal cords felt stiff, unpracticed, like muscles that had atrophied from disuse. He tried again, forcing air through his throat, shaping it with tongue and lips in patterns his brain remembered, but his body had forgotten. K. The syllable came out hoarse, barely audible. He swallowed, tried again. Kayden. It hurt, actually hurt, to speak, like his throat was lined with broken glass. But the word was clear enough. Kayden what? Myra pressed, her hand still near her sword. Where are you from? What are you doing in Shadow Needle? More words, more effort. Kayden's mind raced, trying to formulate answers while simultaneously processing the surreal reality of standing in a forest, under blue sky, talking to living people who weren't trying to eat him. Don't, he paused, breath catching. Speaking was exhausting. Where is this? The hunters exchanged glances. The old one's eyes narrowed suspiciously. You don't know where you are? Boy, this is Shadow Needle Forest, 10 leagues southeast of Greyhaven, 20 leagues where Ashfall used to... Ashfall! The word exploded from Kayden's throat before he could stop it, louder than he'd intended. Something in his tone must have registered, because Myra's posture shifted slightly, hardening, giving way to something that might have been sympathy. Ashfall's gone. Has been for 5 years. Plague wiped it out. There's nothing left but ruins and... The rest of her words faded into static. 5 years. The math was simple, brutal. He'd been 12 when they'd thrown him to the creature. If 5 years ago the village had died, then 10 years. 10 actual years had passed. Time in the abyss and time in the real world ran at the same rate. He was 22 years old. The village that had sacrificed him had been dead for half the time he'd spent in hell. You're from Ashfall? This from Corin, his earlier fear replaced by curiosity. But that would make you... How old are you? 22. The number came easier now, his throat remembering how to function. Each word was still deliberate, carefully formed, but possible. 22. The old hunter, someone had called him Jarek, looked skeptical. So you would have been 12 when the village died. No survivors made it out of the plague. No one. So how... Jarek. Myra's voice carried a warning. She was still watching Kayden with that sharp, assessing gaze, but the hostility had faded. Let him talk. Kayden met her eyes. Green, he noted distantly. Alive. intelligent, human. After 10 years of seeing nothing but mindless hunger, the simple presence of reasoning thought in another being's gaze was almost overwhelming. "I left," he said slowly, choosing words with the care of someone defusing a bomb. "Before plague, 10 years ago. Ben—" He paused, searching for a word that would make sense without revealing too much. "Away. Survived. Came back. Don't know how." It wasn't quite a lie. It was technically accurate, while omitting every detail that mattered. But his brain was still catching up to the reality of language, of social interaction, of needing to explain himself to anyone. Myra studied him for a long moment. Then, slowly, deliberately, she sheathed her sword. "Stand down," she ordered. The other hunters relaxed fractionally, though they kept watching Kayden with varying degrees of suspicion and fascination. "Corin, what you just saw, that speed, what do you make of it?" The young mage swallowed hard. "That was, I don't know, inhuman. I mean, I've seen A-rank hunters move fast, but he was just there, Myra, 3 meters in a blink. And the weapon," this from one of the other hunters, a woman with dark skin and dozens of small braids. "Is that bone? Who fights with a bone sword?" "Someone who survived something they probably shouldn't have," Myra said quietly. Her eyes never left Kayden. "You said you don't know how you got here. What's the last thing you remember?" "Ruins. A creature with too many teeth. Pain. The shard burning through his palm. Darkness. Fell asleep," Kayden said, which was close enough to true. "Woke up here, in grass." He gestured vaguely at the forest around them. Not where I fell asleep." "Teleportation?" suggested Jarek. "Vortex energy user could have moved him." "Without his knowledge or consent?" Myra shook her head. "Unlikely. Vortex users are rare, and they don't just randomly move people." She looked back at Kayden. "Show me your hands." The request caught him off guard. "What?" "Your hands. Both of them." When he didn't move immediately, she added, "I'm trying to help you, but I need to see if you're marked, cursed, possessed, anything that might explain what's happening." After a moment's hesitation, Kayden lowered his bone sword, slowly, non-threateningly, and held out both hands, palms up. The right palm, where the shard had entered, glowed faintly scarlet. The runic scar was clearly visible now in the forest's dappled sunlight, a cracked scar pattern pulsing with internal light. Every hunter in the clearing tensed. "By the light," Corin whispered. "What is that?" Myra stepped closer, her eyes locked on the mark. I've never seen anything like that. It's active, pulsing, some kind of energy signature, but not mana, not any of the higher energies I recognize." She looked up at Kayden, and for the first time, there was genuine concern in her expression. "What happened to you?" Kayden looked at the scar, at the scarlet light pulsing in rhythm with his heartbeat, and tried to find words that would explain 10 years of hell, a crystal that had merged with his flesh, and a return to a world that had moved on without him. "Don't know," he finally said, because that, at least, was completely honest. Myra studied him for another long moment. Then, slowly, deliberately, she sheathed her sword. "Stand down," she ordered. The other hunters relaxed fractionally, though they kept watching Kayden with varying degrees of suspicion and fascination. "Corin, what you just saw, that speed? What do you make of it?" The young mage swallowed hard. "That was, I don't know, inhuman. I mean, I've seen A-rank hunters move fast, but he was just there, Myra, 3 meters in a blink. And the weapon." This from one of the other hunters, a woman with dark skin and dozens of small braids. "Is that bone? Who fights with a bone sword?" "Someone who survived something they probably shouldn't have," Myra said quietly. Her eyes never left Kayden. "You said you don't know how you got here. What's the last thing you remember?" "Ruins. A creature with too many teeth. Pain. The shard burning through his palm. Darkness. Fell asleep," Kayden said, which was close enough to true. Woke up here, in grass. He gestured vaguely at the forest around them. Not where I fell asleep. Teleportation? Suggested Jarek. Vortex energy user could have moved him. Without his knowledge or consent? Myra shook her head. Unlikely. Vortex users are rare, and they don't just randomly move people. She looked back at Kayden. Show me your hands. The request caught him off guard. What? Your hands. Both of them. When he didn't move immediately, she added, I'm trying to help you, but I need to see if you're marked, cursed, possessed, anything that might explain what's happening. After a moment's hesitation, Kayden lowered his bone sword, slowly, non-threateningly, and held out both hands, palms up. The right palm, where the shard had entered, glowed faintly scarlet. The runic scar was clearly visible now in the forest's dappled sunlight. A cracked star pattern pulsing with internal light. Every hunter in the clearing tensed. By the light, Corin whispered. What is that? Myra stepped closer, her eyes locked on the mark. I've never seen anything like that. It's active, pulsing, some kind of energy signature, but not mana, not any of the higher energies I recognize. She looked up at Kayden, and for the first time, there was genuine concern in her expression. What happened to you? Kayden looked at the scar, at the scarlet light pulsing in rhythm with his heartbeat, and tried to find words that would explain 10 years of hell, a crystal that had merged with his flesh, and a return to a world that had moved on without him. Don't know, he finally said, because that, at least, was completely honest. Myra studied him for another long moment. Then she made a decision. You need help, answers, and standing in Shadow Needle Forest isn't going to get you either. She turned to her group. The Shadow Wolf can wait. We're taking him back to Greyhaven. Myra, we don't know anything about him. For all we know, he's dangerous, cursed, could be. Look at him, Jarek. Myra gestured at Kayden. Really look. He's confused, disoriented, hasn't spoken to another person in who knows how long based on how hard it is for him to talk. He's not a threat. She paused, choosing her words carefully. He's someone who needs help. Kayden wanted to protest, wanted to say he'd been fine on his own for a decade, that he didn't need anyone's help, that he was dangerous and they should stay far away from him. But the words wouldn't come. Because the truth, the terrible truth he'd been avoiding since the moment he woke up in the grass, was that he had no idea what was happening. No idea where he was or how he'd gotten there, or what the shard had done to him. For the first time in 10 years, Kayden Ash needed help. And standing before him was someone willing to offer it. Greyhaven, he said quietly. What's that? Myra smiled. A small thing, but genuine. Nearest city, about 10 leagues north. Home to the Fulcrum Guild, where I work. We'll get you food, clean clothes, maybe some answers about that mark. She extended her hand. Come on, let's get you out of this forest before something actually dangerous finds us. Kayden looked at the offered hand for several seconds. In the abyss, trust was death. Help was a trap. Kindness didn't exist. But this wasn't the abyss. Not anymore. Slowly, carefully, he reached out and gripped her hand with his left, keeping the scarred right one tucked against his side. Her skin was warm, real, human. Okay, he said.
Thank you for listening. New chapters will be released daily on the channel. This audio material was produced exclusively for the Section 56 channel. All rights reserved. Have a nice day.